I did not think that it was the type of quarterback that Hugh Freeze liked, Joe. But when I went and watched Payton Thorne this weekend, some highlights, the dude is actually not pretty athletic. Okay. Yeah. Look, statistically, from a passing yardage and touchdown perspective, he did take a step back. But here's what's interesting. He got better in decision-making, which I love. He only threw 2 less passes from 2021 to 2022. He went from a 60.5% completion percentage guy to a 62.5% completion percentage guy. I know with that, you got to add in, well, Blake, he's going to play in arguably the toughest division in college football in the SEC West. I just don't think he's that bad of a quarterback. He scrambles. He had 4 touchdowns, 5 total touchdowns the last 2 years running the football. I just don't think he's as bad as some people make him out to be. I did find it a bit interesting. What I didn't find what I just knew was going to happen, though, they'd been searching for a quarterback. What's crazy is, Joe, both Alabama SEC teams going out there to get transfer quarterbacks, which is probably the most surprising thing to me because those teams historically do well in getting quarterbacks to be a part of their team.
Right. So there's a couple layers to this that you just brought up. The first one, I completely agree with you. You would think that with the current guys on the roster with Robbie Ashford and then TJ Finley, who's now departing from the program.
Okay. My bad.
I thought he's supposed to be leaving, right?
He's in the portal. Yeah, he's in the portal.
So with those guys on the roster who are athletic guys with good improvisational skills, knowing what Malik Willis did, knowing what Chad Kelly did, I would have thought that was going to be the type of guy. And having those guys on the roster, the competition would have come down to one of those two, and then they would win the job. I do agree that Payton Thorne is a much better athlete than we give him credit for, but I still agree with you on that initial point of he does not feel like a Hugh Freeze quarterback at all. He doesn't. And maybe this is a good thing. Maybe it's a different style of quarterback than we're used to seeing, and it will lead to a different offensive approach. I do find it interesting. Some of the things you do see on Twitter right now, Blake, are people saying that Payton Thorne probably is going to win the job, but Ashford is going to still be worked into the offense in some measure. So I find this very exciting to see what happens with this offense for Auburn, because there is some capabilities for them to produce. They've got some athletes on that team. It's just a matter of how much of a step forward do they take from last year, which was a pretty big dumpster fire.
I agree with you that it is interesting, but Hugh Freeze has said that he's going to take a step back from play calling and he's going to be a very big integral piece in the offensive play calling, but he's not going to be the person calling the plays. I just think that makes them better because if you have a head coach that it happens all the time. Great coordinators, guys that can call plays. Look, it's what I'm calling for Lincoln Riley to do. Right? Take that step back. Hire somebody. You got somebody on staff, but nobody really likes him. Take the step back. What I will say, though, it's interesting to me the philosophies that these coaches are taking along the SEC. You have Alabama and LSU who have gone into the portal within the last 2 years and got quarterbacks that are more known for their legs. Now you see Jane Daniels progressing. Let's see what works out there. You have guys like Kirby. Now, this guy didn't play, but Jamie Newman, if you remember when Jamie Newman during COVID went to Georgia, it was originally going to be the starter. What's interesting to me is the philosophies of all these coaches somewhat trying to get back to I don't want to say a more simplified offensive scheme because I don't think that they're doing that, and I don't think Hugh Freeze does that. But what does Payton Thorne do that is so dynamic? Now, this could be just the 4th or 5th quarterback down their list and what they were left with. Okay, TJ Finley hits the portal. We'll see. Maybe Robbie Ashford does wind up being the starter there and getting some big playing time because Hugh likes quarterbacks that can use their legs. The one thing with me about Payton Thorne, though, if he can turn down or get down some of those turnovers, and it's going to be interesting because I don't think that that's a big predicate because he's going from the Big Ten to the SEC. I think it's going to get worse on him. But I do wonder if Hugh's philosophy, the second go around in the SEC West, that his philosophy hasn't changed in saying, look, man, we got to throw the football a little bit. Now, I will admit this. Chad Kelly, yes, could run. Bo Wallace could run. But they also really threw the ball at times significantly well. And I think Hugh, when they beat Bama back-to-back years, it was not from running the football. It was lighting them up through the air. I think that that's something that Hugh has always kept in the back of his mind. At Liberty, he had Malik Willis, but I don't mean this in a wrong way. Who else was he going to get to go there, right? It's not like Liberty was a hotbed for quarterbacks to go. I do just say this. I think it's a good addition for them to get to a place where they're 6-6, 7-5, maybe even 8-4. But Payton Thorne is not coming in there and going to win the West for you. It's just not going to happen. The only guy that I think, and it is a hot take, that could go into Auburn and win it for them would be Robbie Ashford. Here's why. He's going to have to use his legs, right? I just don't know if I see Payton Thorne sitting in the pocket, lighting up Alabama, LSU, A&M, Arkansas in consecutive weeks to where he's doing enough to win the West, where Ashford can make athletic play. Look, we saw Bo Nix do it, right? We've seen Bo Nix beat Bama, beat LSU, beat some very athletic teams. But he's going to start in good form. He's not a bad quarterback. He's not great. He's not a great quarterback either. So I know that's long-winded, but I just don't know where to put my thumb on with this Payton Thorne thing.
My only thing where I push back on with Robbie Ashford is that if he was such a dangerous athlete, he's a good athlete. He's a better athlete than Payton Thorne is. But if he was so dangerous to where having him run would give him more of a chance to win than if Payton Thorne was back there.
Why did they go get
Thorne?
Like
well, one, why did they go get Thorne? And then two, why didn't we see more of that last year? I thought that Ashford was promising.
Joe. You didn't think that he showed some flashes of it?
I thought he showed good athleticism, but I don't know if I saw enough of this guy can win a football game with his legs and through scrambling. I thought that overall Ashford was really inconsistent. And I think that that's ultimately why they're going and getting Payton Thorne, is that they want, and I know that you mentioned the turnovers, the completion percentage. It was on a very bad Michigan State team last year. He is still a little bit more consistent, I want to say. He's a little bit more level-headed. I think that it's going to be a little bit more of a consistent pacing on offense in a rhythm. That's why they went and got him. But I got to bring back up here before we end up moving on to the betting scandal stuff. I just find it really it's intriguing to see that we have a lot of the top transfer quarterbacks and a lot of these teams copycat anyway. Well, going outside of the SEC to bring in other quarterbacks. So Tyler Buckner was brought in from Notre Dame. And then I think back to last year with Jane Daniels coming to LSU. And then on top of that, Florida goes to Wisconsin to get Graham Mertz, who's not very good, but they're going to these other conferences. And a lot of them are guys from the Midwest, ironically. That is where they're going to get these quarterbacks from. So that transition, this wave of going and getting guys from outside the conference, I don't know if that's because teams are effectively keeping guys from transferring within the conference, but I do find that an interesting facet to this new wave of quarterback in the SEC.
Well, the SEC, you can't now go into the portal and go to an SEC school. That window has closed, okay?
Yes.
But I don't know who would leave. I mean, outside of Vandergrift at Georgia, I don't know who else who would have left an SEC school to go to another SEC school in the conference. Now, could it have happened? Yes, but I don't know what quarterback would have done that. I'm going to tell you something you're not going to like, okay? This is my opinion. My opinion is some of these quarterbacks are seeing the athletes that the SEC is producing and going there. I don't mean this in a wrong way. Tyler Buckner has more weapons at Alabama on the second team than I think that he had weapons at Notre Dame, period.
Okay, that was a step a slight too far, but I don't disagree that he does have better weapons.
Well, you say that. They're backups from a season ago, and the guys that are going to be rotational pieces, 2 of them are 5 stars, and one of them is going to probably be an all SEC performer.
All right, that's a good point.
So
I will concede that.
Okay.
I'll concede that.
All right. Payton Thorne might see the same thing. Now, here's a caveat and flip side to that.
Yeah.
So more DBs from the Big Ten are getting drafted than the SEC. And high draft pick, which is nuts. It's not my take. It's literally what has happened. There's a transition going on that we're not talking about here. More SEC quarterbacks were drafted in this draft class than ever before. Ever. Okay? Mm-hmm. You look in the first 40 picks. You got Bryce Young, Will Levis, what's your boy's name? Anthony Richardson.
Oh.
Well, Anthony, I'm just talking about SEC.
Yep. Yeah.
And that's where majority of the quarterbacks have come from. And I think that's been a little bit of a trend. You had Burrow. And look, Stetson got, which, by the way, I'm not going to let you live that down. Stetson did get drafted in the 4th round, even though you told me he wasn't going to do it.
Okay.
But even so, Joe, Hendon Hooker got drafted.
Yeah.
So think about this. There's a very strong potential that every SEC quarterback that started in 2022 is going to get drafted. Okay? Maybe outside of Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt, I don't think. So you had Stetson. I think KJ Jefferson gets drafted. I think eventually Weigman gets drafted. I think
Will Rogers probably gets drafted too.
Rogers probably gets drafted too. So name a time where you've had a year in a conference that every starting quarterback in the conference besides one got drafted. You couldn't do it. So I think that you're right that there's a little bit of a change in where Payton Thorne sees, you mean Hugh Freeze in the SEC? All these Anthony Richardson just got drafted 4th overall? That's something that I think I'm going to continue to pay attention to. Now, that's just a deep thought that we haven't really gotten into. I guess I know I make a lot of that, but do you agree or disagree with that?
No, I agree. And I think one layer that you didn't bring up with this whole argument too, with all those guys gone, I think guys on the outside see there's not as much competition this upcoming year in the conference. There's only a couple schools that have returning. I'm not saying that the overall competition, I'm just saying there's not that many returning quarterback starters in the SEC. So if you're a guy with experience in another conference,
there's only two. There's only two. So LSU and Vanderbilt are the only two that return starting quarterbacks.
You are effectively coming from another conference are going to have, and Mississippi State. You're going to have more experience.
And A&M. I'm such an idiot.
I guess I count A&M because he did.
But A&M just went in the portal and got the kid from Fresno.
Oh, that kid's never played. That kid's never played that they got. I thought the same thing, and I was chatting back and forth with somebody, and they indicated that kid is
in South Carolina. All right, I'm an idiot.
But my point is I think that these outsiders look at the big programs lost all of their big guys. They're gone. They went to the NFL. There is less incumbent starter competition for them to step in and deal with. And I would argue that's probably one of the hardest things to do as an experienced quarterback is to face off with another experienced quarterback. Going up against good defense is tough, but trying to outduel somebody, as we saw between Hendon Hooker and Bryce Young, as we saw between Jaden Daniels and Bryce Young, it's difficult. But this upcoming year, man, it opens a window for guys like Payton Thorne to do some damage because there might be a little bit less competition for him at some of these programs.